So you know I'm going to start out with a story. About 2 weeks ago in my travels, I was going to visit my New York daughter, and it's during the summertime, so in the summertime the highlight of the trip is to be able to go out to her place in Long Island. And especially with her being a lawyer, we always have to have like a master plan to beat everybody else. So the master plan was, even though there was a thunderstorm coming, we would wait until the thunderstorm already passed over the city so that we wouldn't have to be in the thunderstorm the entire way driving out on the Long Island Expressway to where we were going to go. Not only that, but we also decided to leave on Friday night instead of going with all the rest of the hoi polloi, driving out to the Hamptons. So, we left we got everything packed up, we had supper first before we even left, and we thought we're going to be so smart, we're going to get to our destination ahead of everybody else, and we're going to enjoy the whole long weekend. It's going to be wonderful. So we followed along behind the thunderstorm, and the roads were wet, but we were making really great time, and we got to about maybe 45 minutes away from our destination, and suddenly Katie's GPS, there was a big red line on it, and it was telling us to get off and reroute. It was recalculating, whatever these things do. And we noticed all of a sudden there was no traffic coming in the other direction. Bad sign. And this highway is the only this is the major highway out Long Island. On the south side of Long Island, you have all of the Northampton, Southampton, Bridgehampton, Holyhampton, and all the other Hamptons. And there's some pretty good roads out there. On the north side are the people who are more exclusive and quiet. And those roads are basically cow paths that are going through the woods, meandering around. So the GPS suddenly told us that we needed to get off, and that's what we did, even though it wasn't the right exit. And the GPS started taking us around, because my daughter's house is on the north side, all these little wooded, tiny roads. Whatever happened was so major that we spent the next hour going through these tiny little roads through the woods, in the darkness, 25 miles an hour, car after car after car, both ways. Not just one way, both ways. Everybody had been kicked off the major highway. And finally, we got to Katie's house at about, 11 o'clock at night or something like that. And we immediately got out a bottle of hooch and had a drink and said, woo-hoo, this is going to make a great story someday. But the thing that saved us really was that GPS. If we had not followed that GPS and gotten off of our main highway and followed its directions, we could have been sitting out there. Heaven only knows how long we could have been sitting there. GPS is a wonderful thing, and it's so interesting that nowadays, if somebody tells you directions as to how to go somewhere, or you're trying to tell somebody directions as to how to get to a certain store or something, it's hard to do because we have become so dependent on GPS telling us that we don't even think and remember directions anymore. Am I the only person who's like that? Right? I mean, we become so dependent. And yet years ago, I can remember, for instance, when I was in sales, the Bible was one of these, it was it had a map of St. Louis by every single, and you had to look on the map to find where you were going to go. So thank heavens for GPS. Even though it was a long night, we were able to get home safe because of that GPS. So of course now we're going to talk about spiritual GPS. We all have a guidance system, and of course, as my preceding speaker already has brought to our attention, we always have choices. But first of all, for a GPS to work, what we need is we need to know where we are. Whenever you want to go somewhere and you're going to purposely use that little map on your phone, the first thing it's going to ask you is, where are you? Because that's the only way it can start plotting out the next step and where you're going to go on your journey. And I think from a spiritual point of view, just understanding where we are is so, so important. It's like Sundragon was saying just a few minutes ago, self-awareness is the starting point for any kind of GPS, whether it's spiritual GPS, spiritual guidance, or the kind of guidance that comes for driving a car. First of all, we need to know where we are. And that's important because it's the first step to awareness. And for us as spiritual beings, just simple awareness, rather than reacting to whatever life throws at us, is so important. As many of you know, I've been, for more than a decade, a caregiver to older adults, and now with the Tiny Habits thing, my specialty is teaching older adults how to be more resourceful, more self-confident, how to be more resilient. And the first step, and the big buzzword that goes around the whole community of scientists and doctors and everything that talk about how to live your life, especially as we age, with more grace. The first step is self-awareness. You have to have some form of self-awareness. Otherwise, we're just being tossed around by all the events in our lives. So, of course, you're going to get some practical tips. First of all, the thing that we hear all the time is meditation. So why is meditation so important? I'm not going to lecture you about meditation, other than to say this. Meditation, for me, and I'm more of a practical person, I have a lot of mystical, magical, but I'm also very practical. The one reason, to me, that we need to have stillness and time to reflect and to meditate is simply to become the observer of our thoughts. If we're just being run around by every single thought that comes along, we have no choice. So the first step, just as Sundragon was saying, is awareness. Otherwise, we're going to be, and I say this every single time I come up here, we're going to be like Buddha said, you'll be like a dog chasing the stick. Every time your thoughts throw out that stick, you just go running after it, and there you go. And life is just a big calamity, and the drama, and so on and so forth. There's no choice. You just keep running after it. And as Buddha says, don't be like the dog chasing the stick. Be a lion. One only throws a stick at a lion once. Yes. Okay. You only throw a stick at a lion once. Then you have choice. Then you have choice. And that's what it is to be a spiritual person. No matter what religion we've been brought up in, the starting point is awareness. Awareness that each one of us, especially from a metaphysical point of view, we are the place where God shows up. We are the place where creativity shows up. That creativity and the options can't happen until we first stop and become aware of where we are. Now, maybe meditation per se is not your thing. There's other things you can do. For me, journaling. And there's new neuroscience that says, actually, when you sit down and write out a problem and start looking and use your hand to write, you are engaging a whole bunch of creative aspects of your brain. So that's the difference. There are some people who like to do everything on the computer. I'm very much a computer person. But when it comes to journaling or even writing out what I'm going to say today, it first starts out with drawing and with writing. So one of the things you can do, if you're not into meditation, is journal every day. And sometimes you're going to journal and it's just going to be, this is what I did today. I went to the grocery store. I did this. I did that. But it's amazing how after that list of things you did, an insight can appear if you're willing to be open and to just start doing that process. Another thing is just simply, that's why we have friends. Talking to a friend is another step towards self-awareness. If something is bothering us, that's why talk therapy works. That's why it's good to have cocktails and dinner with a friend every week, at least. It's good therapy. So having quiet time, even if it's just taking a walk, whether it's having time to spend with others who care about you and to share what's on your mind, self-awareness is the first step to making that GPS work. Because if you don't know where you are, how do you know where you want to go? The second thing about spiritual GPS is that it, of course, in order to route you to, it needs to know your destination. Now, all of us, if we've been in contact with metaphysical thought at all, we all know about the law of attraction, which says that what you focus on, it's exactly what you attract. This is now followed up even with science, because now with science we know that right back in here, there's this little thing called the reticular activating system. This has always fascinated me. It literally is like a GPS. Based on your values, it will seek out things that are important to you. For instance, and I've used this, I know I've used this metaphor before when I've given other talks. If you just bought a new red Honda, all of a sudden you will see red Hondas everywhere. It's the same thing as, you're looking for a book and you go to the library and they say, oh, I'm sorry, it's not in yet. And you're walking out of the library and you'll see just one corner of that book and you know it's the book. Or you're at a cocktail party and you hear somebody else all the way across the room talking about something that you're interested in. That is your reticular activating system working. So we literally are built to attract and create the things that we focus on. But this is what's interesting. What makes that reticular activating system work is your mindset and your emotions. And if you read any of like Esther and Jerry Hicks, anybody who talks about the law of attraction, the one thing they keep saying is feelings. It's your feelings. It's your feelings of excitement. It's your feelings of anticipation. It's your feelings of something is really, really important. That's what sets it up. Otherwise, it could be focusing on 1,000 different things. But that's what makes that particular little part of your brain fire up, is your emotions. Emotions are so important. A lot of times people make fun of like pop psychology and that positive feelings are, sort of, how I say, I've even sometimes, Lena says, oh, beware of toxic. Well, I'm positive Polly. I confess it. And it's so important to think of or to be aware of what we do want, rather than catastrophizing about what we don't want. And as I've often said, as far as habit formation goes, the things that make habits really turn into habits is your emotions, whether they're negative or positive. So cultivating positive feelings. So a lot of us think, well, I would like to have this or that, and we say the affirmation that's connected with whatever, that I want peace in the world, or I want the perfect job, or whatever it is that we're looking for. The important thing to add to it is our intention and our emotion. It's not enough just to say, the more I repeat, there's going to be peace in the world, there's going to be peace in the world. It's then, what are we going to do about it? There's a great little saying that I guess it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago that I saw, probably about the time that all of this happened, and it's this. If you really believed you were guided, wouldn't you begin listening? I mean, how many times we get a thought and then we don't do anything with it? And if you really believe that your life was about to be transformed, wouldn't the celebration already begin? Wouldn't you already be getting ready to do the thing and to be happy about it? Emotions are the things that set that GPS in motion. And I think for us that's the challenge, because we come into a metaphysical community because on an intellectual plane, it just sounds like such a neat thing. You know, just what you focus on, you can, you know, and God wants you to be successful and so on and so forth. But it's transferring that intellectual knowledge into actual events, into actual behavior, into actual intention that makes the difference. And I think that's one of the reasons why we come here and why we need to come on a Sunday morning, to just remind ourselves of what our true essence is. Because as soon as we leave this place, believe me, there's going to be 1,000 reasons to become distracted and to veer completely off the path of whatever it is, because we're so busy being busy, we forget what the really important things are that we want to have happen in our lives. So, first of all, we need to know where we are. Then we need to know where we want to go and be conscious, make conscious decisions about that. And finally, as far as GPS goes, spiritual GPS anyway, we need to trust that that GPS is so smart, it can recalibrate. We're all fine in just going from point A to point B, but what about when all of a sudden there's a red line and it says you need to get off, and life is handing us a great big interruption. It could be a happy interruption, it could be a difficult interruption, but those things are going to happen. GPS can recalibrate, and what makes it work is we have to be able to trust what it tells us. So if we've been driving on the Long Island Expressway and that came up and said, well, that's ridiculous, why should we be getting off here? We're not supposed to get off until exit 53, not exit 39. Well, we would have found ourselves in a whole mess of trouble. But instead, that GPS recalibrated and changed the whole route. For all of us, whatever challenges we are facing, we need to be able to trust that Spirit, God, Divine Presence is going to be there for us. Trust is so, so important. That's what makes the whole thing work. It's one thing to be religious on an intellectual level. It's another thing to be religious and spiritual in your heart. Because when your spiritual path is in your heart, then you can trust and know that it's going to be okay. I can remember one of the most difficult concepts for us to get as we were being trained as spiritual mentors and later on as ministers was this whole idea of how do you pray for somebody who's facing any kind of a big challenge and a difficulty. And I can remember Reverend Phyllis saying over and over again, you have to look above, from above. Getting involved in all of whatever is going on is only producing more of what's already going on. You have to look from above and know that beyond all those circumstances, things are going to be all right. That takes trust. That's where spirituality really kicks in. One of my favorite authors is Sylvia Boorstein. She's a wonderful Jewish Buddhist author. My favorite book of hers is, That's Funny, You Don't Look Buddhist. And she has a wonderful, I was looking for some kind of a metaphor to talk about this whole business of trusting. And trusting is really about being still and just knowing it's going to be all right. And in one of her, I guess it was a retreat, she had a student who was talking all about her concerns and her worries, and the student was saying, you know, when I'm at home, I'm always worried about this and I'm worried about that. And as soon as I go to Hawaii, I feel wonderful. And Sylvia said, that's the thing. You can be in Hawaii now. And this is what she means. It's not like suddenly painting a new picture in your head that all of a sudden you're in Hawaii and everything's going to be okay. It's instead learning to let go, to totally let go and to know. And the best way that I can describe this feeling that she was talking about going to Hawaii, is about going on any kind of a trip, especially an airplane trip. I do a lot of traveling, and I'm very much a to-do list person. So I have my checklist. I just go check everything off, everything about the house, everything about the wardrobe, what I'm going to bring, and so on and so forth. That's the easy part. And then you have to leave. You have to make sure you get to the airport on time. Then you have to make sure that the parking place that has space to open, because sometimes you have to suddenly make different changes and go to a different parking place. Finally, you get to the airport. Then you have to go through TSA. And then you have to find your gate. And then you hope that they didn't change the gate and you didn't hear it, that you're getting on the right plane. And finally, you get on the plane. And finally, they close the door. And there is the most wonderful feeling of, if I don't have it with me now, I'll buy it when I get there. It is the most wonderful feeling of just complete freedom, because there's not a darn thing you can do about what you're leaving behind. You are plunging into the future. You are trusting at that moment that no matter what comes up, you are going to have a great time on that trip. That's what it is to truly let go and let God. That's what trust is, and that's what makes GPS work. Spiritual GPS. So in closing, here is just another metaphor of what I'm talking about today. To go with the flow of your life is to live without a map, to be vulnerable to having your plans changed. It is to trust that God is in the rapids of change as well as in the rocks of stability. It is being able to stop digging your heels in against the tide of tomorrow. It is exercising a suppleness of spirit in which you respond to the nudgings and promptings of grace, or your own GPS that's spiritual, moment by moment, day by day, in a dance with life. Change is our entree into being more of the emerging magnificence of who we really are. So the question before us all is, are we willing to accept that all the changes in our lives are actually births, not endings? Thank you.